I start every time together with this little preamble. Um, yes, it is called Morphology Monday, but that's probably because I like alliterative titles more than that's an accurate descriptor. And so when we're talking about morphology, we cannot not talk about phonology and etymology. So really what we're talking about here is our whole spelling system, which is our English orthography. And within that are the three categories. And sometimes it makes more sense to tap into the morphology or the phonology or the etymology, just depending on the word or depending on what it is we're exploring with our students. So yes, it's Morphology Monday, but we're going to be talking about these other pieces of the puzzle, but you can't just look at one part. When you look at one part exclusively, like phonology, which has been the basis of a lot of reading instruction, that's when we get into this anger, frustration, confusion around why is it not spelled this way? It makes no sense that it's not spelled this way because these letters aren't supposed to make these sounds or whatever it is. And so when we rely just on one of those things, that's when the confusion or the frustration comes out. We have to look at all of the parts. Okay, so this is one of those topics where I've wanted to talk about for a while, but I never really knew where to stick it. And because I've been left unsupervised for this month, I figured, hey, let's do it now. So there is a distinction between function words and content words. And when you understand that distinction, it helps us, I think, make greater sense of our spelling system. So when we think of function words, oh, before I move forward, this work comes from Peter Bauer's work out of the WordWorks Literacy Center, and it was part of one of the learnings that I did with him. So if you're looking for some more information, I can definitely link you to some content that he has shared in this area, but that's where this information has come from. So function words can be thought of as the working words in a sentence, whereas the content words are the lexical words or the the stuff that's happening in the sentence. The other way to think about this is the function words are the words that help make the sentences work and function, whereas the lexical words are the meaning-making words. So you can think of them as this way. One of them is not imaginable. If I was to ask a student to picture in their mind BE as a word, they might stare at you blankly. However, if I ask them to imagine BEE, B as a word, bzz, I've got that one. So sometimes the difference is between what I can picture in my mind and what I cannot picture in my mind. The other thing that you can use to structure or figure this out is this. If you look at the sentence, I went to the store, the content words are went and store. The function words are I to the. And in fact, if you say the sentence, I went to the store, but you say it as if you were talking to somebody in conversation, I went to the store, you probably slur together or truncate the function words. Because even though we're shortening up those words or we're not saying them as clearly, the meaning of our sentence is still stressed on those content words. And so we know what that other person's saying, even though they didn't clearly enunciate every single part of the words in the sentence. So our brain does a lot of filling in the blanks when it comes to function words. Function words can be unstressed in speech, which is what I just talked about, how you kind of mumble through them or you don't say the whole thing. Only function words use one or two letters. They can use more, but they're usually the short words in a sentence. And it's a closed set of words. We're not constantly adding function words to a word bank. It has been the same collection of words for quite some time. and very rarely does it get added to. In contrast, content words are less likely to be shortened or unstressed in our speech. Now, that isn't to say that they can't be. That's why I wrote less likely. Because we do often, not often, we sometimes like shorten content words and then it becomes slang. Like the word sus, that apparently is a thing that my children use in speech. And I'm like, pardon me? So rather than saying the whole word suspect, we just say it's sus. So it's not that we don't shorten content words, but when that happens, we're usually talking about something related to slang, as opposed to unstressed words in a sentence. Content words use at least 3 letters. This is really important, and I'll get into that in a second. And content words is a collection of words that keeps growing and evolving. So it can change over time. Meaning develops, words develop different meanings as different groups adapt to them. As different things are invented, we add new words, right? The dictionary adds new words. Another way that I've seen this clarified is content words would be from a dictionary. Function words would be from a grammar book, if you were looking for another distinction. Okay, so when we look at homophones, which we briefly talked about last day, if one of the words in a homophone set is a function word, it's going to be the one that uses fewer letters. So we have the function word or, and we're contrasting it with 2 homophones, or like Minecraft. See, you can tell how old my children are. Or like as a boat, right? A boating oar. And then we have 2 as a function word versus 2 and 2, B. So if we have a homophonic pair, whatever one uses the least amount of letters is the function word of the 2, if it is a function word, okay? So I'm going to show this video to you. I'm going to narrate it because some folks like to just listen to the recording, and there's no sound in this video because that's how old it is. So the Real Spelling website no longer exists. They've removed it from the interwebs, but the Real Spelling toolbox still exists, but you need to subscribe to access it. Now, this video once lived on the Real Spelling site, and I found it buried in the depths. And so why the doubled letters? The term vocabulary is essentially imprecise. Use it only in the sense of the set of words known and used by someone. Don't use vocabulary to refer to the whole set of words in a language. To refer to the whole set of words in a language, irrespective of who might know and use them, use a term with the base lex. Lexical and function words. Lexical words, also referred to as content words, have a denotation or specific meanings, can be defined in isolation, are the principal concern of dictionaries, and are usually stressed in a sentence. Specific meanings defined, dictionaries stressed. That's lexical words. Lexical words can be nouns. They can be verbs, such as eat, wander, float. They can be adjectives like soft, clever, heavy, or adverbs, very, easily, only. Function words, in contrast, have little meaning of their own. They give information about the function of the lexical words. They're mainly the concern of grammar books and are usually unstressed. So function words, little meaning, giving information, grammar, unstressed. Function words are prepositions, to, at, for, by, of, pronouns, me, we, her, us, they, articles, the, a, an, any, auxiliary verbs, be, do, can, may, or conjunctions, if, as, but, and. Spelling conventions for lexical words. Note well, the real conventions of spelling always override phonology. Convention number 1, use at least 3 letters to write a lexical word. Examples, the spellings of OD, EG, ER, EB are phonologically complete, but because they are lexical words, they need to have at least 3 letters. So what do? We double that final consonant so that the word has at least 3 letters to stand out on the page. The extra letter has no phonological function whatsoever. Convention number 2, I've mentioned previously. When a lexical and a function word are homophones, use 1 more letter to write the lexical word. So all of these are function words, in, for, by, to, or, but, be, we, and they all have lexical homophones. So to make them longer, we add 1 more letter so that it is no longer a 2-letter word, it is now at least a 3-letter word. And we see that they are spelt by doubling that final letter that the homophone pair has. Now, noticing here that 4 is not just doubled. We don't just have a double R at the end of 4. So we've got 4 F-O-R-E and F-O-U-R because there are times when we need to look to other grapheme combinations to make those same sounds. And so this is one of those times where the phonology of things come into play. So there are examples where it's doubled, and then there are examples where that's not how we get around the phonology of things. The theory about the origin of this convention dates to all the way back to the development of the printing press. And they believe that they wanted to have bigger words, basically, associating the size of the stress on the printed page. So lexical words stand out more than functioning words because they have more letters. Okay, this connects us directly with the homophone principle. And we talked about this last time that we were together. So to me, this is the one principle that if someone had mentioned this to me, like, I don't know, many years ago, like game changer. This is a game changer as far as I'm concerned. So when possible, words that are pronounced the same but are unrelated will have different spellings to mark the differences in meaning. Having multiple graphemes that make the same phonemes is a feature of English spelling, not a bug. We need this to distinguish homophones. And if you remember back to that little video that I just showed you, where we had for, F-O-R, remember, it's the shortest of the collection, therefore it's the function word. And then we have F-O-U-R and F-O-R-E. Well, we know that those are grapheme combinations that make that same phoneme sound. And so we put them in there so that we can have the same sound come out, but visually on the page, we see the change in meaning, the change in spelling. So that's the other piece of this, is understanding that it's not just about the sounds we hear. It's really about connecting the meaning of the word as we read it on paper, which is the other, I think, distinction that I'm not sure anyone ever pointed out to me. So the homophone principle goes hand in hand with exploring, I think, function and content words. Now, when we look at function words, people at times throw their hands in the air because they don't follow any of the rules, and they're sometimes called high frequency words or sight words. I've also heard snap words and popcorn words and heart words, and like you name it, we have a thing that we call this collection of words. Ultimately, what's going on is we have this collection of function words. As I mentioned earlier, we tend to have them unstressed in words when we're saying them in sentences. And so because they're unstressed, they no longer have the sounds that we think they should have when we see the word on the paper. And so that's what creates the confusion. The fact that we're a talking species is basically what has created the confusion. So because we unstress those words in sentences, now we get these situations where we're like, hold the bus. How is that even spelt like that? That makes no sense whatsoever. And then we throw our hands up in the air and say, English is ridiculous, and walk away. The reality is, though, there is a process, there is a way that we can explore these words with students. Now, if you haven't picked up on this already, am a big fan of the High Frequency Word Project. Now, there's another resource that Gina Cook is in development. Apparently, I ordered it in November. I totally forgot. It's not printed yet, but apparently it's coming my way. And she's doing something I think very similar to the High Frequency Word Project. But basically, the High Frequency Word Project is Fiona Hamilton and Rebecca Lovelace picking a list of 100 high frequency words, which happen to be function words, and have developed a process to help students understand why they're spelt the way they are. So their three-step process is very simple. We are going to anchor the meaning by having the students say the word in sentences. So if the word that we're looking at is the, T-H-E, can you use that word in a sentence? And we gather up our sentences. So we understand that our students know what word we're talking about. Like if we're talking about the word bee, we're not having a bunch of sentences about flowers and pollination. Okay, wrong bee. So anchor the meaning. Then we're going to analyze the word. Part of that is looking at the structure. Part of that is looking at the grapheme phoneme relationships. And then looking into the letters. And in that connection of analyzing the word comes the story. So what's the story of the word and how does it help us understand why that word is spelled the way it is? Then they talk about practicing the spelling, which is a piece of the puzzle that doesn't always come through when you look at some of the other structured word inquiry approaches. And so they offer several suggestions of how you can practice the spelling, including tap spelling the word, writing the word, reading the word. And the writing the word doesn't always mean pencil paper tasks. It could be the person sitting in front of you is going to turn around and you're going to write the word on their back and they're going to feel those letters. Writing it on your hand using a whiteboard. Maybe it's with manipulating letter tiles or graphing letter clusters, depending on how you've got how things are structured. And then hunting around and finding that word in context. And we all know that when we've worked with particularly the tiny humans, once they've seen the word somewhere and they know what that word is, they can find it anywhere. And so you make them into little detectives and they go around and they will tell you every time they see the word the. You're welcome. One of the pieces that they talk about is the importance of short, frequent practices. So we're talking about like a 5 minute practice every day, as opposed to a 30-minute practice once a week. Because we all know, we have all experienced study for the spelling test, write the spelling test, still can't spell the word correctly. So having short, frequent practices allows the brain to build a better pathway in that understanding and allows them to be able to replicate and share their knowing, basically. So on their website, they do share a sample. And so this particular sample is for the word my. And so to box the base, we would just draw a box around my because it in itself is a free base. There's no affixes attached to my at this point. And then they have the story that goes with it. And so all of their stories start once upon a time in Old English, for the most part. That's where the origin of a lot of these words live. And it talks about here how my used to be spelt mi. And it was the short form of the word mine. So you would have said my leg, but then you would have said mine arm because it started with a vowel, which makes you think of like when little kids are learning to talk, right? And it's mine toy. It's not my toy, right? They haven't made that connection between the two words. So I thought that was really interesting. And so this also gets into the spelling convention that we have, that complete English words don't end in the letter I. And so because Y and I are friends, which I think, yeah, I've attached here, they help each other out and do each other's jobs. So if you're hearing, or at the end of the word, you want to put an I there, we don't do that for complete English spelling of words, and we throw a Y in there. And we talked a little bit last day about yeah buts, the yeah buts of it all. And all of those yeah buts can be explained. So hi is actually considered like a slang or an abbreviation of hello. So that's not a complete English word. Kind of like sus that I was talking about earlier. Like that's its own kettle of problem. Anyway, taxi is short for taxi cab. So it's been a chunked word. So ski is Norwegian. So like anytime you come up with a word that ends in a I, sushi, another example, there's a reason why it doesn't have a Y. And it's usually because it's not actually a complete English word. It has some other classification. And so all of those conventions are written not with loopholes in mind, but to really explain the spelling system. And so through this word my, we would analyze the word. So what sounds do you hear? I hear two sounds. Can I circle the graphemes that I hear those sounds with? M, I. Oh, the Y is making that one. Can I think of other words where the Y is making an I sound? Maybe that's something I've talked about. So I'm going to brainstorm that little kettle of fish. And then we're going to practice. Okay. So there is a way that we can teach and work with high frequency words beyond. Here's a baggie of flashcards. You're going to take this home, and there's probably going to be tears, but that's okay because they're your mom's tears. And I only want to hear about this when you come back, and I give you more cards to go in the baggie. Okay. And you're laughing because you've all experienced this on both sides of the table. I know it. So there is a way that we can explore high frequency words. There is a way that we can talk about these words with our students by saying, hey, look, they're function words. The reason they're probably not matching what you think how they should sound is because we're lazy when we speak in English. We want to get through the words that don't really matter, and we only hit the words that are important in our sentences. So having those conversations with students, I think, is super important, right? We're just peeling back the layers and creating some understanding about why things are working the way that they do. So what does this look like? Well, have them go on a word hunt. Find the function words. Now, you don't want to release them into the wild, just looking for function words. Give them a little text. Maybe it's in your morning message. Maybe it's from a poem you've read. Maybe it's a picture book that you've read 3 other times this week for other reasons, and you're going to just look on page 10 and you're going to have them find the function words with a friend. You can do word hunts with other concepts. So let's say that we're looking at the ing suffix. Can you find other words with an ing suffix? Does every word that have ing in it, is it always a suffix if we have those 3 letters together? Can we think of examples where that's true or not true? Have them go off, explore, discuss. Same thing here with prefixes. So having students tuning in to the words around them is what is going to create curiosity about words and language. So we've talked before about word families and how they all share a common base element, such as, in that we think of that as a spelling, and then the meaning, the root. And we add prefixes and suffixes, sometimes several of each, and we build words that share this base. One of the things that Mary Beth Stephen has been talking to us about is how we can shift our thinking around spelling tests to build them out around word families. So what would that look like? Let's say we have the base MAKE. So students would get out a piece of paper, and at the top of their page, they would write MAKE in those little angle brackets. And as soon as you put the little angle brackets around it, you no longer say it as make. You say it as the letters you see, MAKE. So we're going to look at words in the MAKE family today. I would like you to write this at the top of your page. So everybody writes it at the top of the page. Now you're going to have a list of 5 to 8 words that are in the family. So maybe the first word that you're going to have them look at is making. I am making a cake for my birthday. Making. And what the students are going to do is they're going to write down the synthetic word sums, which are this structure, where it's the this plus this plus this gives you this, as opposed to the opposite. So they're going to write the synthetic word sum to show you how it's built. So they would have MAKE, and then they would write plus, and then hopefully when they hear the word making, they hear ing. So they'd write ing is rewritten as, and then they're going to do the little blurby blurb where they go MAKE, cross it out, replace the E, ing, MAKING is how you spell making. And you would go on and on and on. Now, you are only going to pick this as a base word if you've already talked about the suffixing convention that happens when you have a final non-syllabic E, as we've begun to call marker E. If you have not talked about this with your students, or it's the thing you want to do next, but you want to know where their level of understanding is, think pre-assessment, then you would have them build out these word sums to see how many of your students leave the E on and then add the ing suffix. You might want to do some other things around, like let's say the base word was mate, MATE. Maybe that's not a word you'd use in like grade 5 or 6, but work with me here. Okay. So let's say I offered the word roommate as my list because I want to see if they leave the M on room and the M on mate together to make that compound word, because it's actually 2 bases that are working together there. If you are wanting to do something like this and you're like, Charlie, I cannot think of 5 or 8 words that are in the make family. Like, what kind of time do you think I have? Well, good news. So if you go to the website, he's the same guy that makes the mini matrix maker, and it's called the word searcher. And so you can click on the word searcher, and if I know that MAK is going to be in all the words, right? Because that E is going to be replaced depending on how I'm suffixing it out. I can put that in and it's going to give me a list of all of the words with MAKE. So I've make, maker, makes, makers, make up, making, remake, makings. Now, lawmaker, That one could be fun because it's got two base words, right? We've got a compound word there. Homemaker, that could be fine. Now, but you might find words in here that don't actually fit in the word family because it's just running on the letters. So you have to use like a level of your own understanding. You can't just blindly pick from this list. You have to know what these words mean, because you might pick something that has got that those letters but is not connected by meaning. This becomes particularly handy when you start looking at bound bases, Latin and Greek bound bases. And like that's a whole other series, let alone 45 minutes. So if you're stuck and you're needing to make some words with around word families, this is a great place to start. If you really want to start somewhere simple, you want to pick a base that is not going to have a lot of suffixing, like there's not going to be any conventions that you have to follow. So something like the word kick, right? It doesn't, like kicker, kicks, kicked, kick off. You're not doing anything. You're just putting the parts together. So that would be a really easy base to start with to teach students how to build word sums and how to start thinking about the parts that go together to make these words. Obviously, this activity is precluded by a conversation about what a word sum is and why we use them, and what a prefix is, and what a suffix is, and what a base is. So this is not where you start, but this is a place where you can keep going to build that understanding with your kiddos.